I'm Sherri Arrington, and I'm a charter member of the Auxiliary of the Reamer Club. I grew up in Mishawaka, Indiana. I came to Purdue in 1971. My major was political science and minor history. I got a BA in that, and then I got a BS in consumer and family science. I left the university in '79. I currently live in Palmer, Alaska. I did not pledge to the Reamer Club. I was a charter member of the Female Auxiliary in the fall of 1972. So when I was a sophomore, I had a friend that I had roomed in the same dorm with the year before who mentioned the Reamer Club to me. Another girl had told her about this Reamer Club that none of us had ever heard of, and that they were talking about starting a girls' auxiliary. And she asked me if I was interested, and so several of us in our dorm were like, yeah, we want to know more about it. And so a guy named Dave Schattinger came over to our dorm and talked to us about it, and he sort of made a decision about whether or not we were good enough for the club, you know. And then from there, you know, it was pretty informal because a lot of the girls were girlfriends of guys in the club, and the club was really small and they needed people, and that's really kind of how it got started. It was just more bodies to get the work done. That sounds crude, but you know, it was small organization that was really faltering in numbers. So anyway, we came together as a group, and I think there were 12 of us, and we got our boards different from the guys because we weren't really club members, and we had no formal pledging. We didn't have to learn any of the traditions. We didn't learn the cheers, the songs, anything. We attended the meetings, and the 12 of us as an auxiliary got one vote in club meetings. And because, well, you know, it was the early 70s, women didn't have the same value as a man. And so anyway, through the course of the year, then in the spring, we had our own pledge class that paralleled the male pledge class, and they were doing the same sorts of things as the guys did. And partway through that spring semester, the club voted to become a co-ed organization. And of course, at that time, women's rights and changing in things, like things that were going to be happening. And so we were kind of in the forefront of that in a way. Not that that's why we did it, but so then we became full-fledged members. And I think to the surprise of many of the guys in the club, they found out that the girls were very engaged in the work of the club. They thought that sports and supporting sports activity was a guy thing, and they didn't realize that the girls were very invested in the organization too. And one of our original members was the first female member of the president of the club. I suppose about the third semester that we were involved, so pretty quickly. And so the girls became a really force, I think, in the club. When I was in the club, our meetings were organized. We use an agenda. Our room set up with like the president and the secretary in the front of the room, people on either side of an aisle. Advisors were always in the back of the room. I believe I would say we were organized and efficient. Most of the people who had roles in offices in the club were also working like in student government in their dorms or otherwise, so very well versed in running an organization. So I think we had well-run meetings, short hour out the door. Well, I think that for the Reamer Club being a smaller club, having people who had experience in dorm government and things like that meant that we didn't have to do a lot of training of people. We didn't have to do a lot of trying to learn how to do things to run an efficient organization. So it was helpful in that we were bringing in older students at that time. So we had some experience in running an organization, which made it run more fluidly. And I think that when you're involved in other organizations and around the university, you have a perspective maybe of some of the needs where you can, things that you might bring interest to the club in addition to the standard things, not just the Boilermaker special things that we do around campus that make us a little unique. When I was in the club, we had Hell Night for our pledges. And to be real honest, I'm trying to remember, I don't remember specific things other than it was outside in the spring, in the woods, at night, dark, and we made it as miserable, whatever we made the pledges do as we could. I think we pretended it was building character, but it was just a night of being mean. And I mean, it's like everything else in the world, the standards of what's appropriate behavior changes. I mean, I was a history person. History's history, everything happened doesn't mean that we would do that again, I don't have a specific traditions that I'm more fond of than others or that are more meaningful to me, but I'm the person who embraces history. I mean, it was my career, my education, and that's one of the things that I really like about the club is that we embrace history and we find it important that we continue talking about the story of the university, and we want people to know facts about the university and maybe help dispel myths. And so for me, it's just the idea that we embrace our past and we want it to be known. I think just realizing that the Reamer Club, as small as we were at the time, that we were significant in the university, that we did some things that were important in bringing recognition to the university as the caretakers of the Boilermaker Special. I think one of the coolest things we did, though, was initiate the idea of the extra special and start that process. I'm not sure who initially brought it to the club, but I remember some ideas about it being discussed and then beginning to, where do we get, like the golf cart and how are things going to work? There were a few guys that were always involved with the BMS who got to, work with the engineering people and got to throw their ideas out there about how it was going to work. But I don't remember a lot of specifics about it. There were women who became pilots, a couple when I was still here, and there were a couple who were being allowed to be taught how to be pilots. It wasn't common, but there were some starting after a couple of years in the club. We were all co-pilots right away if we wanted to be. But I don't think there was a negative necessarily about it. It just, there were people who were the pilots and they were just always the guys who got to drive. It took a little while for that to break in, yeah. Well, I like that we always were just out on campus with the Boilermaker, like on the Fridays, especially in the nice weather, you're outside, you're running around, people are aware of who you are and enjoyed the special. We had, on all the football home games, we worked a couple different parking lots and it was a way of making money, but it was fun because you were outside with your friends messing around. It was always fun to get to be on the special at the games. The away games, because the attention that the special got was fun. So mostly it revolved around football and the special. Okay, so of course, there's always interesting moments that are the unusual. And one year, some of our pledges had their pots stolen at Lions. And we were able to identify some of the little thieves, and they were members of the Gimlet Club. And we attempted to get our pots returned. And of course, we had no leverage and they weren't willing to give them back. So someone came up with the brilliant idea of taking something of theirs, of course, retribution. And so we hatched a plan and we went over to the storage area where the Victory Bell was kept. And one of our friends in the club, Scott Daly, knew everybody over there, and so he chatted up the guys and got their attention on something else, and the other three of us wandered around looking at things, and a couple of us blocked the view between the Victory Bell and the employees, while the third person took the clap rod of the Victory Bell. It was just a rod that screwed in, unscrewed it, stuck in his pants, and we walked around for a few minutes so it wasn't obvious we were running straight out the door, and then we left. And we went back to the Union. And at that point, I called Tom McHenry, who was Dean of Students, and said, he was a Reamer. I said, Dean McHenry, we have a little problem. And I said, we just stole the clapper out of the victory bell. And I won't repeat his naughty words, but he then negotiated a trade with the Gimlets. The next weekend was a home game. I believe we were playing Iowa. And he brokered a deal that they gave us our pots in exchange for the clapper and the victory bell and some liquid refreshments. And we were such a poor team that year. Normally, I think the victory bell only rings after a game if we win. We performed so poorly that they rang the bell after every score. And it just happened that game we scored a few times, and so they actually ran around the field yelling ding dong with their victory bell because they didn't have a clapper for the first half of the game. Well, I never would have made it through school if I hadn't joined the club. Unfortunately, I grew up not a very independent person. I was never taught how to be independent, and I struggled when I came here to have a place. And I went through the little sister route and all that stuff, and there's lack of structure there and just kind of open-ended party now and then. When I became a member of the Reamer Club, it gave me something to do on a regular basis. It gave me my university family. And so I saw the Reamer Club in a sense of, really, it was my security here. It was my sense of belonging on the university. And I could kind of look at it like that was my nuclear family. And as we leave the university and we branch out, like the alumni clubs and now the Affinity Network, those are kind of like our extended family that we don't see as much as our nuclear family, but we still get to have some connections. And so, yeah, the Reamer Club, I think, kept me in school. And it gave me my sense of a purpose socially, and which then helped me academically stick to it and get through school. The Reamer Club for me also helped me as a person recognize that as I leave the university, as I go out and build a career, that there's an important piece of my life that is continuing to give to my community. Here we did things for the university, and I think I learned that partially through the Reamer Club, that going on in life, leaving here, that an important aspect of my education was learning to continue to give to my community.